Hi everyone, today we're talking about frequency tables and graphs. First of all, what graphs are we looking at? Column graphs and histograms. What are the difference? Well, first of all, column graph is also known as bar chart and they're used for discrete data and categorical, whilst histograms are used for continuous data. That is, columns graphs are for things that you count, whereas histograms are for things that you measure. So if we're talking about how tall you are, 150, 160 centimeters, we're talking about histograms. And if you're talking about counting how many apps you have on your phone, for instance, you're looking at column graphs. This is what they look like. A good way to remember it is, and distinguish between the two, is looking at the gaps. The histogram is continuous data, so it has no gaps, whereas the column graph has gaps. A tip to remembering which one is which is looking at the title. Histogram is one word, it's continuous, whereas column graph has a gap in the name. Even bar chart has a gap, so that's very handy for us to remember it. Which of these are histograms and which of these are column graphs? This one and this one are histogram, and these two are column graphs. Let's look at the first example. If I ask 165 Year 8 students how many hours they spend on social media during the weekends and had the results here, like the first student said 3, I spent 3 hours, the next one said 2, and it's like 165 results, how would I draw a frequency table and a column graph? Now recall that a frequency table is a table with how frequent a number occurs. So we're counting how many ones, how many twos, how many of each number happens to be there. So first of all, in the first column, we have to write down what are we talking about. We're talking about hours on social media. And we're looking at the numbers and we notice that the smallest value is 0 and the biggest number in there is 9. So we wrote our numbers in the first columns between 0 and 9. After that, we can sit there and tally all the numbers 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, and you continue doing this until you go through all the values 0 to 0, etc, etc. I'm going to do that and I'll get back to you in a second. Okay, once we finish writing the tally, we can find the frequency. So we count them all up. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. There are 25 zeros in there. You can count them to check if you like. There are 60 ones. There are 52s, there are 18 threes, there's 10 fours, 0 5, 0 6s, 1 7, 0 8, and 1 9. I'm going to neaten this up and go to the next slide. So how do we draw a column graph from all? So how do we draw a column graph? First of all, we have to draw the horizontal axis. And we can label it with whatever we're talking about. So in this case, hours on social media. And because it's between 0 and 9, we can draw out the basis for our columns. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And we can go vertically for the frequency and write down the word frequency on the side. It's very important that you label everything. And we look at the frequency and it says 60 is our biggest and 0 is our smallest value. So we start at 0. Between 0 and 60, it's a good idea to go by 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Then you look at the first value. There are 25 zeros, 25 people that answered 0. So we go to 25. And you draw your little bar graph with a ruler, please. You go to number 1 and the 60. And make sure that you're leaving a gap between these because we are doing a column graph which has a gap. So let me show you what it looks like if with one that I prepared earlier. So at the end of it, it should look like that. And notice that there is a title. And it's super important that you have a title. What happens though if the next question gives us data that is not whole numbers? What do we do about that? How do we label the horizontal axes? That's when we're looking at grouping data. For example, in this frequency table, there are more than one number in each of them, 0 to 9. So the column graph would have 0, the next number would be 10, the next number would be 20. So every first value would be at the intersection there, and this whole column would include numbers between 0 and before 10, so 9. But how do we determine how many in each of these? Each of these is a group or class interval, and they represent the width of this. How do we determine whether we're going to put 10 numbers like we have here? 0 to 9 is 10 numbers in there. Or how do we decide whether we only want 4 numbers or 5 or 1s? Well, we divide our range by 1, 5, and 10, and whichever number gives us a value of between 5 and 10, then we use that class interval. We do this so that we don't have too many or too little columns, or too many or too little class intervals. Let's look at the first example. Here's a list of students' height in centimeters. Construct a frequency table and draw a histogram. So let's look at the biggest and the smallest number to find the range. 183 take away 150, we have 33. Now from 33, the range, let's divide this into 3 different options that we have for our class interval. So the number we have for each section that we're going to put in our frequency table. So if 33 divided by 1 is 33, 33 divided by 10 is 3.3, 33 divided by 5 is 6.6. I always divide the 10 one first because you can just move the decimal point once, and then I just double it for dividing by 5. That's a neat trick. So we're looking for numbers between 5 and 10. So not this, not this, this one. So we're going to use intervals of 5 this time. So let's clear that up. So we now know that we're using intervals of 5. So between 150 and 5 values, we will have 150, 151, 152, 153, 154, that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to have in our first row 150 to less than 155, and so on. So remember to label your columns appropriately, and after that we can tally them up. So if you look at each class interval, we have 150 to less than 155 as we counted up to 154, and then 155 to less than 160. So there's 5 is a value. So 5 is the width or the amount of each of these class intervals. So we have one value for 150 to 150, less than 155. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 values. Well, they're in order this time, so we don't really need to draw the tally, but I'm just putting it there so you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the next bit. 1, 2, and that's it. Oh no, actually just 1. 170 is in the next slot. Be very careful of that. 170, 171, 171, so 4 in the next slot. Then we have 180, 180, 181, 2, and 3. They all belong in the 180 range, so 5 here, which means we have nothing there. So let's neaten it up and let's go and draw our histogram. So for the histogram, we had to have the x-axis as the student's height, and there were intervals of 5 as we have discussed. So therefore you have 150, then 155. Remember, this value belongs to the column to the right of it. So 160 belongs to the blue column, 165 to the green, etc. And then we looked at the frequency and we made sure that we drew according to the frequency height. Don't forget the title. All right, that's it. Bye, guys.